It was 1945 when the Cold War began, a war of words between the two superpowers after World War II, the US and the Soviet Union. The Cold War wasn't like any other war. It wasn't marked by a first shot fired or a declaration of war. It was more like one of those awkward situations between two people who clearly don't like each other, but neither one said it to each other's faces, except this situation could have extinguished all life on Earth. The two believed in the completely opposite political system, the United States believing in democracy and the Soviet Union believing in communism. They were the hot and the cold, the yes and the no, the up and the down, the in and the out. Like I said, completely opposite. During the Cold War, the world was divided by politics and ideology into East and West. The end of World War II brought up a new type of warfare in the form of the atomic bomb. In the 1950s, there were massive amounts of nuclear testing between the United States and the Soviet Union. One incident that could have ended it all for everyone was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, where the U.S. trained Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Fidel Castro, Cuba began to make links with the Soviets and made a secret agreement to place Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba to stop any more U.S. aggression. Similar to the Jupiter missiles the U.S. had placed in Turkey and Italy in case of a Soviet invasion. The missiles were secretly shipped to Cuba and construction began to make them operational. On October 14, 1962, U.S. U-2 spy planes took several photos showing sites of several ballistic missiles under construction in Cuba. The Soviet ballistic missiles had the range to reach all the way to Canada and mostly all of the United States. To help them deal with the crisis, JFK assembled the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or EXCOM for short. At first, they believed a full-scale attack and invasion of Cuba was the only option. But the president decided not to. They decided to blockade Cuba, calling it a quarantine. Any Soviet ships found to be carrying weapons were turned back. The U.S. turned to DEFCON 2 and prepared for an all-out war. World War III was so close to happening, but thankfully the Soviet Union and the U.S. finally came to an agreement. They would both remove the missiles from Cuba and Turkey. The United States also promised to leave Cuba alone. The Moscow-Washington hotline was set up to allow both leaders to communicate directly, and the Cold War would continue on for decades.